What's up guys, Jordan from Bennett's Customs. We are back on the race car. That deadline is fast approaching, but we are getting stuff done. We are ticking boxes. Basically, the Model A frame rails are now fully welded in. I've boxed them, which in this video, I'm gonna show you how I did so. The frame itself, just the rigidity of it wasn't quite where I wanted it to be. So I ended up designing and making some boxing plates. And in this video, I'm gonna show you how I did that. So make sure you guys like and subscribe and hit that notifications button. And let's get into getting this frame sorted out. So we got our template here. Literally very simple, just has a tiny little kick right here. So I'll cut two of these out and end up with some holes or some ovals or something. Using the Unimig Razor Cut 45. I've had it for quite a few years now. I've never had an issue with it. It's always, done what I've needed it to, even really thick stuff. Hopefully that's going to be turning into an actual table in the next month or so. So I'll be able to just, get on the computer, get crazy with the keyboard, and watch this stuff cut out automatically and not have to do cardboard templates anymore. That'll be a bonus. Basically, we got this, transferring it down onto some 3/16 plate and gonna cut these out now. Little tip too, you actually can use this cardboard to put your end against. I know it sounds crazy, but I've done it a ton of times. It actually does work. You just have to be gentle with it. Kind of, you're letting the torch do the work. You're not forcing it through anything. And then, obviously keep your eyewear on and stuff like that. Speaking of, this is definitely not a paid, shout out or anything like that. This dude, G-Wiz Cycles, he is on the sunny coast, I believe, in Queensland, and this is where a lot of you have asked about where I get my safety glasses, and these are from him. He sends you a really nice little card. On the back, just says thanks for choosing our glasses, and he does do a couple different colors. These are the ones I usually use when I'm doing some oxy work or using the plasma cutter, and then he's also got kind of a blue tinted one as well. I use these literally every single day. I love them. They have the kind of little side screen protector on them to keep that stuff from coming in behind your glasses. Yeah, definitely just want to shout him out. He's a rad dude. He sent me these a while ago, and I just absolutely love them. And I've seen tons of comments of people wanting to know where they come from. So hit him up. I'll put the link in the description and hit him up, and he'll be able to sort you out with some safety glasses. When you're using the plasma cutter as well, just a little tip. When you're, when you're manually using one and you're not using a table, I throw mine over my shoulder just so that there's no way of it catching anything as you're making, your cutting motion, as well as just do like a few dry runs, like kind of, know where you're gonna cut, make sure you're not gonna hit anything. The worst thing that you want is to be able to try and go and cut a clean line and then you bump your elbow on a clamp or something, and you kind of take a little bit out of your material. So I always just throw mine over my shoulder and do a few dry runs prior to doing it. Another thing too is that when you're actually on your line, I don't know if you can quite see this, but when I'm using a bit of flat bar here, but you can see that it actually goes in almost about 5 mil. So you want to make sure when you're cutting something and you're using, an edge to cut on, that you want to make sure that your cutting line is going to be on either side of what you want to cut. So, I'm using a Sharpie line. Usually I like to use a pen or a scribe because it's a bit more accurate, but you want to make sure you're cutting on the right side of that line. So you want to set this up properly. So we'll get this set up now and get it cut out. One thing too, when you're making fish plates, is you do want to make sure that you have a nice edge to be able to fill Sorry for my shaky hand, but this here allows us to fill this edge. You know, if you don't want this to go right up close like that, because you're not going to be able to get enough penetration, especially if you're going to grind this and make it smooth. So you do want to have that kind of step right on the edge like that, and then you, in order to be able to get a nice pass inside here while welding, and then you are able to still round this edge off with still having a lot of penetration and quite a bit of weld to hold that through. So just to make it safe, you know, it's just like a little thing that I'm sure a lot of people do, but you can even do like little tabs if you wanted to kind of hold it, and you can have it kind of hang, you know, over and have a nice little gap. So we got our fish plates just sitting down on the frame rails. I've just kind of mocked up where the transmission mount's going to go, so those will kind of come across here. I'll end up probably tying these in together too, just to add a bit more rigidity. Well, one thing I want to do is obviously add a few speed holes, originally similar to what I did before in the box tubing, but I will do it for this. So what I made before was just like a little template, basically just a piece of flat steel with some, looks like 25 by 25 square tubing tacked to it. And what that does is actually run on the top of the frame rail to keep everything square. I've cut these notches out here, and what those would be for is to, you know, split this is exactly center, so you can run a line all the way across to make sure everything's going to be exact. And I'm just laying out a few holes, trying to keep the distance obviously even between everything as we go, and I will continue to get at least 2 more out of this, hopefully. I wish I was able to do this whole plate out of one piece, but I don't have it, and I didn't want to go to the steel joint, so it will be in 2 pieces, but that's totally fine. So what I'm going to do now is just lay all these out and get them cut out. One thing too I wanted to mention, I've got a couple of these cut out, and here you can see I have the jig that I use to cut out these holes. Much like a plasma cutting table, when you start that initial cut, when you pull that trigger, you want to make sure that you're not doing it on the actual cutting edge of your shape. So what I mean by that is, I'll just spin you around. You want to, I'll demonstrate with a Sharpie here, rather than starting directly on the edge, you're going to put a hole in. So basically what that's going to look like is you're going to have a nice clean edge, and there's going to be a little hole from where you've started that. So like I said, much like a plasma table, you want to start your cut on the inside and then work around. Let's see if I can find one down here and you can see what I mean. So that there, I started on the inside, worked to the edge, and then went around. And also, when using the plasma, obviously you're going to get the best cut when you're pulling towards yourself. You know, when you're pushing this away, it's going to want to grab a bit on that steel, and especially coming into these corners. So your best cut, or your most fluid cut, is going to be when you're actually pulling this towards you. So sometimes if I'm starting, I'll cut in here, I'll kind of work around, and then when I get to this area, sometimes I will actually stop and start, which is kind of what I'm explaining not to do. But if you can do it in one motion, it's okay. But basically, you're just trying to achieve the cleanest cut possible. So on these ones, you can kind of see that, you know, is pulling towards, so you get obviously a really clean cut. And then in here, if that'll focus, you can see that's where I've pushed it, so you kind of get a little bit of a, you know, a bit of a jolt. So nothing a little sander can't get in there and do, which I will end up sanding these, but I just thought, yeah, it's just a nice little tip to kind of start off the edge, and sometimes even drilling a hole for this thing and then actually using that is also really good as well. Because when you're starting this on a full thing, you're actually shooting the electrode down, but it also wants to bounce back into the tip, and that's kind of how you ruin your consumables. So yeah, drilling a hole, even if you want to do that, then that allows this thing to actually penetrate straight through with not actually having to blast through this right away. Probably better for thicker metal, but with 3/16 it seems to work just fine. So let's get this one cut out. Plate is tacked in, and I've just started welding it. And yeah, what I was trying to explain is, if you look at that, it's a really nice fillet weld that kind of sits in that gap. So there's actually not a lot of grinding at all to take the edges off this, which is really nice. So yeah, as long as you got your setup right, and when you go to weld that, you'll do minimal grinding, which will be amazing. So we're just bouncing back around, you know, not going to do one full pass on one side. You obviously want to disperse that heat. Also just let it cool down. You know, I just walked away and came back. And yeah, basically I was going to show you with a ruler. This is the amount of material that you're putting on there. So that's on edge, so you can see. So, you know, if you get that edge in here right, you're going to have a really nice weld and not a lot of grinding, so it's going to be really nice. Just noticed I got a bunch of slag on my ruler. But yeah, so give it a try, make sure everything fits really nice, and yeah, just take your time. So we've completed all of the welding. Actually looks really nice. Both sides are done. Just letting it cool down, and then I'll end up just grinding all the welds. One little tech tip too, when grinding, I like to actually grind off the surface. What I mean by that is, the grinder is going to be moving clockwise, and you always want it to come off your material. So basically down here you can see I've started to grind the weld, and I'm grinding off this, and the reason I'm doing that is because I know that this is my, you know, that's ultimately the finish I want to get to. So once I start grinding and I can feel that, I know that is, you know, the low, that's enough material I need to take off. And then same with when I get to the top here, I'm gonna be on this way, counter or clockwise, spinning, so it's gonna be coming off the edge this way. And then, you know, if you're going the opposite way, you're digging a lot of this out without, you know, not having to. So if you come off your material, both ways, that'll kind of give you your initial height for the top and the sides, and then you can go along in 45 and then blend the rest of it. But yeah, it just works for me. You guys might have a different way of doing it, but I just thought it's an easier way of doing so. so we got the majority of the top section blended. Just trying to see if you can see that a little bit better. Yeah, there you go. So a few different steps for trying to blend welds. Mine are usually a flat disc on the grinder. I do put the handle back on. I feel like it's a lot easier in your hands and just gives you a little bit more stability. Basically, I use either a 40 or a 60 grit or even an 80 grit flat disc just to get that initial cut down. And then what I use afterwards is this on the grinder. Mine's pretty worn out, but basically I'll either use an 80 grit or sometimes even a 40 grit piece, stick that on, and then again, same idea, spinning clockwise, kind of coming off your surface, and then as well coming back up on this side. And it's just nice because it is quite a hard platform, so it is nice to be able to blend that, like, you know, relatively uniform with utilizing your flat surface. And then once that's finished, just use your standard orbital DA with 80 grit on there, keeping it flat, obviously, and just going over it like that. So with a few different steps, you know, you can usually achieve a really nice uniform bend, almost making it look like it was all one piece. And you're not taking out a lot of material because of that step that we initially put in there. So there's still a lot of material that's in there that's holding it together. Yeah, it usually works out really well. So now we'll continue on to the rest on the bottom side, and then we got to flip this over and do the other one as well. So got a bit of work cut out for us, but we'll get through it. On to the other side. This one finished, and one more to go. With all this as well, I'm just going to wire wheel all this now, and then once that's all wire wheeled, I will use a rust converter and just wipe that in there just to kill all the surface rust. It's a Galmic product, ionized rust converter and sealer. I usually apply it with a brush, sometimes steel wool, you know, a red Scotch-Brite, whatever you want to usually use, but this stuff works awesome. So this will convert everything that's there, and basically I'll be able to happily put those plates straight over this. We are nearly there. Just letting it cool down a little bit. Then I'll just go through, run a few more passes, sand, grind, and basically it's gonna look the exact same as it did before, but better. And then we'll mount our cross member mounts where they're gonna go, and might even drill some extra holes depending. I'm not really sure yet, but we'll see where we're at when we're finished it. But I'm really excited to see the end of this. So it's coming very close.
wrap. We've got the frame off the table. The boxing plates are fully welded in. Everything is sanded and finished the way I wanted it to be. I blended them as much as I can to make it look like they have been there from factory. So basically it's on the jack stands. I've mocked in the motor. I've had to obviously, try and make a new cross member section. But I'm super happy with the way these frame rails turned out and the boxing plates as well. A tip as well, for someone who's gonna do this on something that's like gonna be street use, I would definitely suggest like setting up a jig and then welding your boxing plates in. Obviously, as you just seen, I've kind of had the frame up and clamped to some steel, and then I've welded the boxing plates in. I was pretty confident there was no twist, there was no bend, everything's still super true. But if you are building and designing like a really nice Model A frame or a 32 frame or whatever you're building, I would suggest obviously trying to make a really nice jig to keep that thing at its exact measurements and tack and weld those boxing plates in so that nothing moves. You don't, even down to a degree, you do not want anything to twist or move. I kind of did it a little bit of the cowboy way, but just, obviously, I would suggest trying to just spend the time, make it right, because the long run, you're gonna have a very true frame, which everything else will complement that. So basically, if you're into this, build, if you look on our channel, we do have a little red ribbon, which is the Percolili ribbon on each thumbnail of this race car build. So we are up to, I believe, episode 7. So if you look back into our previous videos, look for that red ribbon, and you can basically watch this from day dot when we first started. Next week's episode, we are creating this beautiful cross member that is going to allow tons more room for our feet and a lot more rigidity for kind of what we are after for the frame and structural reasons. So make sure that you guys like and subscribe and hit that notifications, and we will catch you next week. Woo!